Most people see Henry Clay Frick as a collector who gave America marble halls, Italian bronzes, and quiet galleries on Fifth Avenue built for contemplation and grace. But the fortune that raised those walls was sealed in blood at a steel town called Homestead. This film follows the mansion room by room while Pinkerton rifles crack outside locked mill gates, while pay ledgers harden and names vanish from payrolls. It asks how beauty could rise so fast, who paid the true cost, and what remains when philanthropy tries to outrun history. Western Pennsylvania in the 1880s belonged to coal. Black seams ran beneath hills like veins beneath skin. Towns rose where the earth split open. Men descended before dawn and emerged after dark. The coke ovens burned without pause, transforming coal into the fuel that made steel possible. Whoever controlled coke controlled the future of American industry. Henry Clay Frick understood this before he turned 25. He was born in 1849 to a family with no money and no connections. His grandfather ran a distillery. His father struggled. Young Frick worked as a store clerk, then a bookkeeper, watching ledgers reveal what sentiment obscured. Numbers told the truth. Profit came from margins, not mercy. By 1871, Frick had borrowed enough to build his first coke ovens. He was methodical. He bought land when prices collapsed during financial panics. He reinvested every dollar. He formed alliances with men who valued efficiency over sentiment. Within a decade, he controlled 80% of coke production in the Connellsville region. Andrew Carnegie needed that coke. Carnegie was building an empire in steel, and steel required coke in vast quantities. The two men met in 1881. Carnegie saw a mine that matched his own appetite for scale. Frick saw the platform his ambition required. They formed a partnership. Frick became chairman of Carnegie Steel Company in 1889, managing operations while Carnegie traveled and philosophized about wealth. Frick brought discipline to the mills. He cut costs relentlessly. He tracked waste in ounces. He believed unions interfered with natural economic law. When workers organized, he saw inefficiency. When they struck, he saw insubordination. The Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers represented skilled laborers at the Homestead Works, Carnegie's largest plant. They negotiated wages based on sliding scales tied to steel prices. Frick found this arrangement intolerable. In 1892, the contract with the Amalgamated Association was set to expire. Steel prices had fallen, which meant worker wages would fall under the sliding scale. But Frick wanted more than lower wages. He wanted total control. He proposed a new scale that would cut earnings by 22%. More importantly, he proposed ending collective bargaining entirely. The union rejected his terms. Frick had anticipated this. He began preparing months in advance. He ordered the construction of a fence around the Homestead plant, 3 miles long and 15 feet high, topped with barbed wire. Workers called it Fort Frick. He cut holes in the fence at regular intervals, rifle ports disguised as observation slits. He installed searchlights. He arranged for strikebreakers to be ready. He contacted the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. Pinkerton provided private security forces for corporations nationwide. They had broken strikes in mining towns and rail yards. They operated outside local law enforcement, answerable only to whoever paid them. Frick requested 300 armed guards to occupy the Homestead plant and protect replacement workers. The contract expired on June 30th, 1892. Frick locked out the workers. Every man who refused the new terms was barred from the plant. Nearly 4,000 workers suddenly had no income, no access, no leverage. The town of Homestead depended entirely on the mill. Grocery stores extended credit. Families rationed food. Men gathered at union halls, trying to decide whether solidarity or starvation would break first. Frick was building something else during these same months. He had purchased land on the corner of 5th Avenue and 70th Street in Manhattan. The plot measured 200 feet along 5th Avenue, 150 feet along 70th Street. It was one of the most prestigious addresses in America, a block from Central Park, surrounded by the homes of Vanderbilts and Astors. He hired architects. He ordered stone. The mansion would rise 4 stories, contain 26 rooms, and display his growing art collection. He wanted Fragonard panels for the drawing room. He wanted a pipe organ. He wanted marble imported from quarries that had supplied palaces in Europe. He studied every invoice, approved every detail, demanded perfection in execution. 2 visions moved forward simultaneously. In Homestead, locked gates and empty pay envelopes. In Manhattan, marble shipments and architectural drawings. Frick moved between these worlds without visible contradiction. He believed he was building civilization itself, a temple to culture that would outlast the noise of labor disputes. The men at Homestead were interchangeable. The art was eternal. By early July, the mansion plans were approved and construction was imminent. By early July, the Pinkerton guards were boarding barges on the Ohio River, armed with Winchester rifles and preparing to sail under cover of darkness toward Homestead. Frick believed he had calculated every variable. He had capital, legal authority, and armed force. The workers had only their refusal. He assumed refusal would collapse under economic pressure. He assumed violence, if it came, would be brief and decisively in his favor. He was wrong about the violence, but the mansion would still rise. The Pinkerton barges moved upriver through fog on the morning of July 6, 1892. 300 men stood on deck, most of them recruited days earlier with promises of steady wages. Many did not know they were being sent to break a strike. They carried rifles they barely knew how to use. The barges were towed by a steamship called the Tide. The plan was to land at dawn, occupy the plant before the town woke, and establish control before resistance could organize. Homestead was waiting. Lookouts had spotted the barges hours earlier. Church bells rang, whistles blew. Thousands of workers and their families rushed to the riverbank. They carried rifles, stones, and improvised weapons. They built barricades. They knew what the barges meant. If Pinkerton guards took the plant, the strike was over. If they failed to land, the company would have to negotiate. The barges reached the Homestead dock at 4 in the morning. Pinkerton agents tried to disembark. Workers blocked the gangway. Someone fired the first shot. No one agrees who. Then, everyone was firing. Rifle fire cracked across the water. Men fell on the barges and on the shore. Blood spread across wooden planks. The agents retreated into the barges, trapped on the river with no cover and no escape. The battle lasted 14 hours. Workers poured oil on the river and tried to set it ablaze. They pushed a burning rail car toward the barges. They fired small cannons loaded with scrap metal. The Pinkertons fired back from portholes, shooting blind into the crowd. By afternoon, both sides were exhausted. Ammunition was running low. Casualties were mounting. At 5 in the evening, the Pinkerton agents surrendered. They raised a white flag and agreed to leave if granted safe passage. The workers accepted, then attacked them anyway. The agents were forced to walk through town while crowds beat them with fists, clubs, and stones. Women struck them. Children threw rocks. By the time they reached the trains, dozens were injured. The agents left Homestead in shame, stripped of weapons and dignity. 10 people died that day. 3 Pinkerton agents, 7 workers, and townspeople. Frick was in his office in Pittsburgh when the news arrived. He read the reports without expression. He did not retreat. He did not negotiate. He sent a telegram to the governor of Pennsylvania requesting state militia. The governor complied. 8,000 troops arrived in Homestead within a week, occupied the town, and reopened the plant under military protection. Strikebreakers were brought in by rail. The mills restarted. Furnaces were relit. The skilled workers who had built their lives around those machines watched strangers perform their jobs under bayonet guard. The strike continued for months, but it was already over. Without access to the plant, without income, without public sympathy after the violence, the union's position collapsed. By November, the Amalgamated Association admitted defeat. Frick had won. He broke the most powerful union in American steel. He established a model that other industrialists would follow for decades. Wages fell. Hours increased. Collective bargaining vanished. The machinery of production accelerated, unimpeded by worker demands. During these same months, construction began on the Fifth Avenue mansion. The foundation was excavated in late summer, 1892. Limestone arrived from Indiana, granite from Vermont, marble from Italy. Frick reviewed samples personally, rejecting any block with imperfections. The exterior would be Indiana limestone, pale and stately, suggesting permanence without ostentation. The interiors would astonish. The drawing room would feature panels painted by Jean-Honoré Fragonard in 1770, depicting scenes of romantic leisure. Frick purchased them from a French dealer for $95,000. A steelworker at Homestead earned roughly $450 per year. The panels cost the equivalent of 211 years of labor. The library would be paneled in English oak. The dining room would have walls of Escalette marble. The floors would be parquet, arranged in geometric patterns that required craftsmen to lay each piece by hand. The staircase would rise in a curve of carved stone, wide enough for 2 people to ascend side by side without touching. Frick wanted a pipe organ installed in the salon. The instrument was custom built in Boston, containing more than 1,000 pipes. Its sound would fill the house during gatherings, a symbol of cultivation and refined taste. The organ cost $12,000, equivalent to 26 years of a steelworker's wages. Every detail was calibrated for effect. The mansion was designed to announce arrival without vulgarity. Frick was not old money. He did not inherit social standing. He built it, room by room, with the same precision he applied to coke production. The art collection would justify his presence among families whose wealth stretched back generations. Beauty became currency. Culture became proof. But the numbers told a different story. The total construction cost of the mansion exceeded $2 million. In 1892, the average annual wage for an industrial worker was $437. The mansion represented 4,500 years of labor. Put another way, if every worker at Homestead contributed their entire annual salary, it would take nearly half the workforce 1 full year to pay for Frick's house. These calculations were not abstract. The men locked out of Homestead in July were starving by October. Relief funds ran dry. Families were evicted from company housing. Children stopped attending school to search for work. The town descended into poverty while state militia patrolled the streets. Some workers gave up and accepted Frick's terms. Others left Pennsylvania entirely, searching for jobs in other cities. Frick never visited Homestead during the strike. He managed the crisis from his office in Pittsburgh, communicating through telegrams and reports. He saw the conflict as a test of will, a necessary assertion of managerial authority. He expressed no regret about the deaths. In private correspondence, he blamed the workers for resisting inevitable economic change. The mansion rose in daylight. The Homestead mills burned through the night. Both were products of the same system, the same logic, the same man. In December 1892, construction on the mansion paused for winter. The exterior walls were complete. The roof was in place. Interior work would resume in spring. Frick reviewed progress reports with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. In Homestead, winter was brutal. Families burned scrap wood for heat. Soup kitchens operated in church basements. The strike formally ended, but the damage persisted. Wages never returned to previous levels. The union was destroyed. The balance of power had shifted permanently in favor of capital. Frick had achieved total victory in the mills, but he had also become the most hated man in America. Newspapers published editorials condemning his methods. Political cartoons depicted him as a tyrant. Anarchist groups circulated his name as a symbol of capitalist oppression. Public anger was rising, unfocused but intense. On July 23, 1892, that anger found a target. Alexander Berkman entered Frick's office at 2 in the afternoon. He was 21 years old, a recent immigrant from Russia, an anarchist who believed violent action could spark revolution. He had read about Homestead in newspapers. He had seen the descriptions of locked gates and rifle fire. He decided Frick represented everything he opposed: exploitation, cruelty, the grinding machinery of industrial capitalism. Berkman carried a revolver and a sharpened file. Frick was meeting with a business associate when Berkman burst through the door. Berkman fired 3 shots. One struck Frick in the neck, another in the shoulder. Frick collapsed, but did not lose consciousness. Berkman lunged forward and stabbed him repeatedly with the file, aiming for the kidneys. Security guards wrestled Berkman to the floor. Frick stood, bleeding heavily, and helped restrain his attacker. A doctor was summoned. Frick refused anesthesia while the bullets were extracted, insisting he needed to remain alert to finish the day's business. The assassination attempt lasted less than 5 minutes. Frick survived. Berkman was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 22 years in prison. The attack transformed Frick from villain to victim in the public eye, at least temporarily. Sympathy letters arrived by the hundreds. Newspapers that had condemned him now praised his courage. He returned to work within a week, the wound still bandaged beneath his shirt. But the attack did not resolve the larger crisis. It clarified it. Berkman acted alone, but his rage was shared by thousands. The Homestead strike had revealed the human cost of industrial consolidation. It had shown what happened when capital defended its interests with armed force. It had demonstrated that labor had no legal recourse, no political power, no protection except its own willingness to resist. The strike also destroyed lives on both sides. Of the 10 people killed on July 6th, most were family men. They left behind widows and children with no income and no prospects. The steelworker, Hugh O'Donnell, one of the strike leaders, never recovered his position. He spent the rest of his life in minor jobs, his reputation ruined, his family impoverished. Others who participated in the strike were blacklisted across the industry. The Pinkerton agents who surrendered faced their own ruin. Several died from injuries sustained during the gauntlet through town. Others were permanently disabled. The agency's reputation was damaged. Public outrage over the use of private armies in labor disputes led to congressional hearings, though no legislation followed. Frick emerged with his power intact, but his reputation stained. He was no longer simply a businessman, he was a symbol. To workers, he represented the violence inherent in industrial capitalism. To other industrialists, he represented the necessary ruthlessness required to maintain control. To the public, he represented a system that valued profit over human life. The mansion construction continued. By 1893, the interior work was well underway. Frick commissioned paintings from living European masters. He purchased Renaissance bronzes. He acquired furniture once owned by French aristocracy. The collection was not random. Each piece was selected to communicate taste, education, and belonging. The Fragonard panels were installed in the drawing room. The oak paneling in the library was carved by hand. The marble floors were polished until they reflected light like water. Frick walked through the unfinished rooms, imagining gatherings where conversation would turn to art, music, and literature. He imagined a legacy that transcended steel and coke. But the house could not escape its origins. Every marble column was purchased with wages suppressed at Homestead. Every painting was acquired with profits extracted from men working 12-hour shifts in 100-degree heat. The beauty was real, but so was the coercion that funded it. The mansion was not separate from the mills. It was their direct product, their aesthetic translation. In 1894, the mansion was nearly complete. Frick and his wife Adelaide prepared to move in. Their children would have bedrooms on the upper floors. Guests would dine beneath crystal chandeliers. The art collection would be arranged according to principles Frick had studied with dealers and curators. The house opened quietly, without ceremony. Frick did not seek publicity. He wanted the mansion to speak for itself, to announce his arrival in New York society through refinement rather than spectacle. Invitations were extended to other collectors, to museum directors, to families whose names appeared in social registers. Some accepted, others declined. The stigma of Homestead lingered, but time was on Frick's side. Memories faded. New scandals emerged. The public's attention moved elsewhere. Within a decade, Frick was hosting dinners for artists, philanthropists, and politicians. The mansion became known for its collection, not its financing. Beauty began to obscure blood. Carnegie, meanwhile, had embraced philanthropy as reputation repair. He funded libraries across America, wrote essays on the responsibilities of wealth, and positioned himself as a benefactor rather than an industrialist. His legacy was being carefully constructed, curated to emphasize generosity while minimizing the methods that created his fortune. Frick took a different approach. He was less interested in public redemption than private satisfaction. The mansion was not an apology. It was a statement. He had won. He had survived. He had built something that would outlast criticism. The Homestead Works continued operating under the terms Frick imposed. Wages remained low. Hours remained long. Unions remained broken. The mills produced steel that built railroads, skyscrapers, and battleships. The workers who made it possible lived in company housing, shopped at company stores, and died young from industrial accidents and lung disease. Frick accumulated more art. He expanded the collection, adding Vermeers, Rembrandts, and Turners. He traveled to Europe, purchasing pieces directly from aristocratic families selling off estates. He attended auctions in London and Paris. He corresponded with dealers who searched for specific works he desired. The mansion became a private museum, one of the finest in America. Frick walked its halls each morning, examining paintings he had acquired, adjusting frames, ensuring everything met his exacting standards. The house gave him what the mills never could, a sense of permanence, of having created something beyond profit and loss. But permanence required one final transformation. Henry Clay Frick died in 1919 at age 69. He left instructions in his will. The mansion and its entire contents were to be preserved as a public museum after his wife's death. Adelaide Frick lived until 1931. When she died, the house opened its doors to anyone willing to pay admission. The Frick collection became one of New York's most celebrated cultural institutions. Visitors enter through gates on Fifth Avenue. They walk across marble floors. They stand before Fragonard panels and Vermeer portraits. They listen to organ concerts in the salon. They read plaques describing provenance and artistic significance. Very few read anything about Homestead. The museum presents the collection as Frick intended, as evidence of taste, connoisseurship, and cultural contribution. The brochures mention his career in steel, but briefly. They emphasize his vision for creating a permanent public gallery. They frame his legacy around what he gave, not what he took. This is how philanthropy rewrites history. The mansion allows Frick to be remembered as a collector rather than an industrialist. The art distracts from the labor. The beauty becomes the story, and the violence becomes a footnote. Museums have enormous power to shape memory. They decide what is displayed and what is omitted. They control the narrative through silence as much as through speech. The workers at Homestead have no equivalent monument. There is no museum dedicated to the men who died on July 6, 1892. There is no permanent exhibition explaining the conditions they endured or the system that exploited them. Their names appear in historical records, in academic journals, in footnotes. But they have no marble halls, no oil paintings, no legacy institutions. The Homestead Works itself is gone. The mills were demolished in the 1980s and 90s. The site is now a shopping complex called the Waterfront. Stores sell clothing and electronics where furnaces once burned. A small historical marker mentions the strike, but most shoppers pass without reading it. This erasure is not accidental, it is structural. Wealth has the resources to preserve its own memory. It builds museums, endows universities, and funds archives. It hires curators and historians. It ensures its version of events is recorded, displayed, and taught. Labor has none of these tools. When workers die, their stories die with them unless someone makes a deliberate effort to preserve them. The Frick mansion endures because Frick had the money to ensure it would. The Homestead Workers are forgotten because they did not. But the mansion itself cannot escape its origins entirely. The building is a witness. Every room testifies to the system that made it possible. The Fragonard panels are beautiful, but they were purchased with suppressed wages. The marble floors are exquisite, but they were laid while families in Homestead starved. The house is an artifact of inequality. a physical record of how industrial capitalism converted violence into culture. Visiting the Frick collection today is a strange experience. The galleries are quiet, almost sacred. Guards ensure no one touches the art. The lighting is carefully controlled. The temperature is regulated to preserve the paintings. Everything is designed to create an atmosphere of contemplation and reverence. But standing in those rooms, knowing their history, the silence feels different. It feels like suppression. The house does not acknowledge its own cost. It offers beauty without context, refinement without responsibility. It asks visitors to admire the collection while ignoring the question of how it was assembled. Some argue this is unfair, that art should be judged separately from its provenance. They say Frick's business practices do not diminish the value of a Vermeer or a Rembrandt. The paintings are masterpieces regardless of who owned them. The mansion is architecturally significant regardless of how it was funded. This argument has some merit. Art does have intrinsic value. Beauty exists independently of its ownership. A painting does not become less beautiful because it was acquired with blood money. But context matters. Ignoring the origins of a collection is a choice, and that choice serves a purpose. It allows wealth to sanitize itself. It allows the past to be curated rather than confronted. It allows beauty to function as absolution. The Frick collection is not unique in this regard. Museums worldwide contain art acquired through colonialism, slavery, and exploitation. The question is whether institutions have a responsibility to acknowledge these origins, or whether they can simply present the art as if it materialized without human cost. The answer determines what kind of history we preserve. If museums only celebrate the benefactors and ignore the exploitation, they become monuments to power rather than truth. They teach visitors that wealth is synonymous with culture, that accumulation is the path to immortality, that the ends justify the means. But if museums contextualize their collections, if they explain how wealth was generated and who paid the price, they become something more valuable, sites of reckoning. They allow visitors to admire beauty while understanding its cost. They preserve the complexity of history rather than flattening it into simple narratives of progress and philanthropy. The Frick Mansion could do this. It could install exhibitions about Homestead alongside the paintings. It could display wage ledgers next to invoices for marble. It could name the workers who died and explain the conditions they endured. It could acknowledge that the house was built on coercion and that beauty does not erase that fact. It has chosen not to. This choice reflects a broader pattern in how American history is taught and remembered. Industrialists like Frick, Carnegie, and Rockefeller are celebrated as builders and philanthropists. Their foundations, libraries, and museums bear their names. Their wealth is presented as evidence of genius and hard work. The workers who made that wealth possible are largely invisible. Their contributions are acknowledged in abstract terms, but rarely personalized. They appear as masses, as labor forces, as economic units. They do not get individual portraits or biographical exhibits. They do not get mansions turned into museums. This imbalance is not inevitable. It is a choice, repeated across generations, to value capital over labor, owners over workers, monuments over memory. The Frick Mansion will likely stand for centuries. It is protected by landmark status, maintained by a well-funded institution, and visited by thousands each year. The building will outlast everyone who knows its full story. Eventually, even the basic facts of Homestead will fade from public consciousness. But the house will remain, beautiful and silent, offering no explanations. This is Frick's final victory. His legacy is his art collection, not his labor practices. He is remembered for what he built, not for how he built it. The mansion has achieved what philanthropy promises: redemption through beauty, immortality through culture. Yet the question lingers: does beauty built on coercion deserve admiration without critique? Can art transcend its origins, or does it always carry the weight of its creation? Is it enough to preserve beauty, or must we also preserve the truth of its cost? The Frick Mansion does not answer these questions. It simply stands, offering its treasures to anyone who enters, asking nothing in return except silent appreciation. But silence is not neutrality. Silence is a choice, and in choosing silence, the mansion becomes complicit in the erasure it enables. The workers at Homestead deserved better. They deserved fair wages, safe conditions, and the right to organize without facing armed suppression. They deserved to be remembered as fully as the man who exploited them. Instead, they have a historical marker in a shopping center parking lot, while Frick has a palace on Fifth Avenue. This is not justice. This is the logic of industrial capitalism made permanent in stone and paint. This is the system working exactly as designed, ensuring that wealth writes history and labor disappears from it. The mansion stands. The workers are forgotten. Beauty endures while memory fades. And the house, silent witness to its own creation, offers no apology. The Frick Mansion is not alone. Across America, estates built on labor exploitation, resource extraction, and systemic inequality now function as museums, hotels, and landmarks. Each one tells a version of this same story: beauty purchased with suffering, culture built on coercion, legacy shaped by selective memory. Which estate should we examine next? What other mansion demands a reckoning with its past? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. If this exploration of history, architecture, and the cost of beauty resonated with you, consider subscribing. And if you believe these stories matter, that context and truth are worth preserving alongside beauty, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because the houses will stand long after we are gone. The question is what story they will tell.